Winter, spring, summer, and fall. Every life. So clearly the winter time, the birth of the new year, which starts at the winter solstice, coming out of the void, the birth of you. And as you grow from infant stage through spring, that's kind of like your childhood. And then you go through your summer, which is representative of your adolescence. And your fall time represents everywhere from the peak of your adulthood all the way down to the death of you. Well, how do you measure a human life? Do you measure it by the number of years that a person has been alive? The truth of this is that's not how God measures a human life. How God measures how old you are has nothing to do with your age. It has everything to do with how far along are you in your life purpose. Have you done what you've come here to do or not? If it's mission accomplished, your life ends. Your purpose is your true age. If you're someone who is up in years, or if you're someone who has different kinds of ailments, you will survive until you have done your purpose on this earth, according to Ecclesiastes chapter 3. Your purpose must happen. And this is true whether you're a Christian or not. This is true even if you're the Pharaoh of Egypt or the Antichrist. You will survive until your purpose on this earth is fulfilled. So what does this mean? This means you can go about your life with no fear whatsoever of death. And whatever your purpose is under heaven, you will survive until that purpose is fulfilled. That's why you're alive. As a male ages in his life, a male starts off with a tremendous amount of energy. And as a male goes on, he expends that energy until he's more or less used up. And depending on what kind of man you are, depends about how used up you're going to be later on in your life. Some people use it all up early on. You probably met a lot of men like that. They had a traumatic spark early on, but they kind of putter off at the end. And then there's some men who start off early in their life and they don't say a whole lot. Their temperament's kind of quiet and they hold back until later. And then later on. But for men, if they don't use what they have, it blows up in their face. It gets used up anyway. You've got to use what you have. And depending on what kind of firework that you are as a man, depends on how it plays out. And many people are just firecrackers. Women do the opposite. They are gatherers. They get the opposite. They spend a lifetime accumulating energies. Women are not held as responsible as men are, biblically speaking. Eve was tricked. She was victimized. If Adam would have done the right thing, they would have never left that garden. Because sin in general means something a little bit different from a masculine perspective as opposed to a feminine perspective. You might be born into sin, but there's a limit to that as a woman. There's a reason why the Bible says it's the sins of the father inherited from the male line going back 4 generations. It specifically says the sins of the father from the male line going back. It doesn't say that about the females. Open it up. It doesn't say that about women. You are not responsible for the sins of your father as a woman. You are entitled to the love of God. Men are a little bit different. Men owe God something. It's the sins of the father going back 4 generations. Men owe God. Adam owes God. And it requires a man like Christ, from a man's perspective, to pay that ransom. From a woman's perspective, it's just about receiving the love of Christ. From a man's perspective, you better know God. If you don't know God like Adam knew God, you're not there yet. You're not quite a born-again Christian as a man. You've got to know God the way Adam knew God. You got to know God the way Moses knew God. But one way or another, That is in your cards as a man. There's a timing for that. That'll either happen on your deathbed or it'll happen in this life. In this life. Jesus said you must be born again in the Spirit. What does that mean? It doesn't just mean, please God, forgive me of my sins. It means you remember your purpose as a man. With a man, you must relinquish your ego and let go and give back to God the gifts that were given to you before it blows up in your face. That's the difference between the journey of a man and a woman. And when I'm talking about the changings of the seasons, men are easy because men are like the solar cycle. The solar cycle is very easy to understand. Women are like the lunar cycle. The moon cycle is complicated. And this is not astrology in the sense of witchcraft. This is the way that God set this up. The lunar cycle is a lot like a woman's cycle. There's a connection between that and ovulation. And the 9.5 months ain't quite a year. Because to understand the lunar side of things, you start to unpack what's happened inside of a woman's body. The moon is receiving the light of the sun. It's receiving. The moon is not responsible for the light that's being shined upon it. Who's to blame for the light that's being shined on the moon? And that's the reason why women need to forgive themselves and recognize it's okay to blame men for being losers. If you are married to a loser, blame him. Blame him. Blame your father. Blame your husband for being a dork. It's not your fault. But if you're a man and you blame your father or you blame your mother, you're not quite a man. If you're blaming others as a man for your life, you're not quite a man, but men are different from women. So you have the winter solstice and the summer solstice. Those are at two ends of the clock, the cosmic clock. You got the winter solstice and the summer solstice. And at each of these periods of time in a given year, there's an opportunity there. But the best time to vocalize what you want, what it is that your heart desires are, is early in the year. And the reason why is because you're speaking into the darkness. You're speaking into the void. You're doing precisely what God did in Genesis. Now, you're not God, but you're made in the image of God. During the winter time and the summertime, one gender is weakened and the other one is strengthened in a way. So the summertime, you might assume, is the male's specialty. You think that, well, a man's the strongest in the summer because the sun's out in full throttle. But the truth of the matter is, pride cometh before the fall. What does that mean? A lot of people only scratch the surface of that. And they go, yeah, pride cometh before the fall. Yeah. But they don't realize that God's also talking about the seasons. He's talking about the season of fall as well. When the sun is at the highest point, when the days are the longest, what we know is the summer solstice. This is very practical. Men tend to be overextended a little bit. They've been planting and doing all kinds of work during the spring, and they start to overdo it. They start to overextend what it is that they need to do. They tend to scorch the earth. When the sun is at the highest point, they tend to plant the seeds of their own demise. So they've been planting good seeds through spring. This is especially true for sinful men. Men plant the seeds of their own demise during the summer solstice of every year, or the summer solstice of their life. We talked about the life, the peak of your life. When you're at the very height of your life, that's when you make the dumbest mistakes as a man. When you're at your strongest. It's biblical. I want to lay down an example. King David. King David, at the height of his glory, King David wasn't exactly Jesus. He made the worst errors of his life when he was at his strongest. The peak, you could say, of his power is when he sowed the seeds that brought down the nation of Israel ultimately. This can be applied also to non-Christians. Because every man follows this pattern in their life. They'll reach a peak of their life, the height of their life, and they will plant the seeds of their own demise. Usually it's their kids. King David's case, it was his kids. Usually it's their kids, but not always. But it's usually the kids that do it. And if you don't believe in God, watch Star Wars. Darth Vader planted the seeds of his own demise as he reached his height as a Jedi Knight. Brought about Luke Skywalker and Princess Leia, which ultimately would mess his life up. Mess up his dark empire. Good for him. At his height, Darth Vader flips to the dark side. At his height, and when he's at his best, he's vulnerable. This is true about Lucifer. You understand what I'm saying? This is true about the devil. This is true about King David at his height. Solomon in all of his glory, wishing for wisdom. At his height, he makes the errors that brings down his kingdom. This is true about every man. There's only one way around this, and that is Christ. And the winter solstice as a man, you need to speak, vocalize what it is that you are looking for, where your heart is. Because just like Genesis 1:1, when the sun is at its lowest and the void is darkest, when you speak into that void, it has the most power. Just like a candle in the dark. A candle in the dark has a lot more power than a candle out in broad daylight. Light a candle, go out at noon, and see how well it works. Light a candle at midnight. Midnight is December. The darkest time of the day is equivalent to the winter of your year. The darkest time of your life, you have the most opportunity to make big changes. The brightest time of your life, watch out. Even Jesus falls under this category. His fall and resurrection had to come from what? The seeds that he planted. If this is true about Jesus, this is true about everyone that's a man. But every single thing that's a pattern in your life is the exact same pattern of the universe, whether you believe in God or not. The exact same pattern is over and over and over again. The pattern of the Bible, Genesis to Revelations, winter, spring, summer, and fall. We're in the harvest season right now. Your life, your week, the beginning of the week, where does that start? It starts on the Sabbath, Saturday. Winter, summer, spring, and fall. Your day, the darkest parts of the day, winter. Spring is next. The morning, summer, afternoon, fall, the setting of the sun. This is the same pattern. The Bible is real and true because it's speaking of the same pattern in every aspect of your life. Even if you don't read the Bible's being read to you. It's being read to you in your day-to-day experience. Every single day you have an opportunity to rededicate yourself to your purpose. You got to know what time of day to do that. It's the morning and the night. The morning and the night. When things are the darkest, you have the most opportunity to make real changes in your life. This is true regardless of your religion. This is just how the universe works. This is how it was created. Take advantage of that. It's the same pattern. This is just how the universe works. That's how it works. And it does matter what part of the world you're in. That's a whole other thing, which, I could really go deep into that. Whether you live in a cold area where there's only 10 hours of daylight, or you live on the equator where there's 20 hours of daylight, it does make a difference what part of the earth you're on when it comes to your mood, when it comes to your motivation, when it comes to your lifestyle. It does matter. You got to take that into consideration. And you best be humbling yourself. The greatest harvest happened here in the United States. because of the way that our seasons change. This is a scientific fact. So it actually proves that what I'm saying is true. If you move your seasons using the same strategy that the United States naturally does, not the country, but the land, you will reap the kind of harvest that this country has in your life. Universal truths that transcend sin is how God's clock works. God's seasons. If you look at Genesis to Revelations, it's not just a story in a Bible. We're talking about the Genesis is like the winter, the void, the darkness. God speaks into it, and then comes what? Then comes spring. Life springs into action. And in the springtime came the rise of the Jewish people, leading all the way into the summer of the Bible, which is the 400-year drought between the Old and New Testament. At the end of the summer solstice is the fall, following the Christ's death. And now we are in harvest season. 2,000 years of harvest. This should give you an idea of what's coming next. Which is what? The death of the year and the rebirth of the new heaven and a new earth. We are at the edge of harvest season. Things are as plentiful as they've ever been. We are in the Thanksgiving of God's timeline. We're about ready to enter into the holiday season, which includes Revelation. Rejoice when you see these things, God says. When you see, wars, rumors, and wars and all this, you can whine and complain and cry about it. Just like in the wintertime when you see Christmas is coming and you see the leaves have fallen and the trees are barren and it's getting colder. Jesus says in the time of the end, the love of many shall grow cold. Why does he say that? Because Revelations happens at the beginning of winter or the very end of fall. The hearts of many become cold. And that leads to Revelations, the end of the world, as people say. It's really the end of the age. In our case, it's the end of the year. And a rebirth, a recreation, cycles all over again. A new heaven, a new earth. That's how God's timeline works biblically. So that's the first part. Your life has a winter, summer, spring, and fall. You need to know what stage of life you're in. How does your life progress? It's not your age number. You could be 15, you could be 50. What matters is how far along are you on your purpose. You could be 50 years old and have the mentality of a 15-year-old and live to be 100. Or you can be 15 and feel like you're 40. What's the best time to pray? All year round. But there's a special time of the year which happens around Christmas time to the beginning of New Year, where it's the darkest. And when it's the darkest, what you speak has the greatest effect. Because we are made in the image of God. We may not be the sun, but we're like candles. And candles have the greatest effect in the darkest times. This is true about your life too. When you let your light shine in your life during the darkest times, it has the greatest effect. Shine your light the most in the darkest times. When it's bright, hold back. It's time to listen. You're more likely to stub your toe if you're trying to out-talk God and the brightest times of the day. That's what you're supposed to do. That's what Ecclesiastes 3 is telling you. There's a time for every purpose. A genuine born-again experience. This is something that is not converting to a religion particularly. But what it is it's an experience of seeing reality for what it actually is. Understanding and experiencing God and remembering who you really are. Who you were before you were born. Remembering who you are besides the character that you play. What actually happens is when you go through this, it's almost as if you have died and seen the other side. That's what it feels like. When you have this experience, It's as if you know everything for a moment. You know past, present, and future. You know exactly why everything is the way it is. And you understand that everything has to be just the way it is. And it's exactly how your life has been intended to be. It's exactly actually what you want. And when you come back from it, if you come back, because you may not come back from it, if you come back from it, you have to remember who you were playing, the character you were playing. That is a genuine born-again experience. If you have not yet experienced this as a Christian, you need to open up your Bible. You need to take the time and pursue the real teachings of Jesus Christ, because I guarantee you they will trigger this experience.